Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, One Rental at a Time, back with his Thursday expert and CEO of Hemlane, Miss Dana Dunford. How are you doing, Dana?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Thank you for giving us some time every other week. It is awesome that a CEO of a company is willing to contribute to One Rental at a Time. So I just want to thank you for me, as well as the entire audience. They really like your videos.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I always have fun on these shows and I always learn something from you as well.
There you go. Well, hey, one of the things I thought we should talk about first is when to self-manage, when is it a good idea? And then when to pay a property manager. Obviously, I chose from the jump to pay a property manager, but I think you shared with me before something like 76 or 71% of folks self-manage. So I thought you and I should talk about it because you really provide stuff for folks that self-manage, which is awesome. I've gotten great feedback. And for some people, it just doesn't make sense. Pay the 10 points and be done, right?
Yep. Yeah. And it's 72% of rental property.
I knew it was 70 something.
You were right in the middle there, or it's right in the middle of what you had mentioned.
That's funny. That's funny. So when you developed Hemlane right from the beginning, your aim, I'm guessing, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was to be that platform to help facilitate and improve and really lessen the burden for folks that self-manage. That's what I take away from jumping around in the application.
Yeah, that's correct. It was also to provide basically a new category in the industry where it was like, great, you have these two options of like do everything yourself or hire a full service manager. And most people fall somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I really want control and transparency over my assets, especially when you're just getting started and you're getting property 1, 2, 3, because it actually helps you understand, should I buy another property down the street?
Yeah.
Should I potentially look somewhere else? And once you're into those details, you know that a bit. However, the administration is really hard. Like, physically giving tenants your phone number and they call you at 2 a.m. for like a maintenance request. A lot of folks are like, well, I don't want that. So I do want to hire a manager, but they always go back to cost and control and then go back to the self-management. And so it was really saying, how do we have the industry work together better, where you can get property management services from licensed professionals when you need it, but you also have that control where, rent is going to you. You're able to control all of that and then plug and play where you need support. And so it was really that kind of middle option that we saw that was really lacking in the industry.
Yeah, folks. And if you're a part of my programs, even just the free course, you need to take a look at that because Dana's put together a PDF on how to use their 30-day trial. I strongly recommend. A lot of people are reaching out to One Rental at a Time, getting in the course, doing the daily discipline, but you want to do more because I only ask for 20 minutes. If you're new, I strongly suggest you executing the 30-day POC and see what it's like to be a landlord. Because I think a lot of folks, I don't know how to say this without pissing somebody off. They kind of glamorize being a landlord, right? It's going to be so much fun. I could do this and this, and it takes work. And there's a lot of checks and balances and audit trail and history that you need to collect that if you're new to it, you may not be thinking about. There's a lot of back and forth that I think Hemlane really helps people with.
Yeah. And that is so true that if you don't set yourself up and you're not educated on how to do property management, you fantasize of being a landlord and just getting a check in the mail every month. And
passive income, right? Mailbox money.
And it's not passive at all from that perspective. And, it depends. Sometimes you can get lucky on one property, your first property, and you're like, oh, this is really easy. The tenants never bother me for anything. And then you get the next property, which is quite different. Or there was a reason the tenants were never bothering you.
Yeah.
You should have known about. So that happens as well.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I did an audit of my rentals this summer. And there was one house that I hadn't had any issues or no calls for like 8 years. Wow. And then I had a triplex that I had 5 turns in a year. And I'm like, well, that triplex is not going to make any money this year because turns are expensive. So that's awesome. So again, I think 72% self-managed. That's amazing. Sitting back, when is a couple of things that you think of, you're like, no, you should not self-manage? Are there a couple?
So I think there's 2 things. It's property as well as personality. I think those are like those two P's are the things to consider. And what I mean by that, with personality and property, I'll start with personality. There are people who are terrible with operations, and they don't check their emails. They are a little bit aloof when something comes up, and they don't like mitigate risk in advance. Like if an email comes from a tenant, they're like, oh yeah, I'll file it away and I'll check it later. They're potentially just too busy, right? And you really have to know with your personality, are you willing to put the work in? Couple of hours, and it's more hours up front. Once you have a good process in place, the hours reduce over time. So that's why it's really hard. People say, how long does it take to manage your properties? And it's like, well, it depends on your property. It depends on you. It depends on how much you're educated on property management, what tools you're using, all of that. But that personality is really important. And there's some people, which I think, Michael, you were really at the beginning, really busy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you were traveling and in like 10 different countries and had no time to even look. You were that person to say, hey, go to
not an option,
a full service manager, versus someone like me who I like to spend my weekends going in, checking how the properties are performing and things like that. So there's that personality. The other one is property. And so from a property perspective, if you have a property in an area where, the tenants aren't tech enabled and you literally have to go down to the property and collect the rent in cash, which I don't recommend, but that still happens today.
Sure.
If there's a lot more work that needs to happen with the property, then that comes down to, okay, is it worth your time doing that? Or is it worth just paying the 10% for a property manager? So I really do think it comes down to personality and property. And then to some extent, property also has to do with location.
Sure.
So we have investors who successfully manage out of state really well, because they know the properties. They've been there. They might have made connections with the handyman. They have a leasing agent on ground who's local, who they trust to do the turnovers for them and place a qualified tenant. But there's some people who literally by sight unseen, don't know anything about the neighborhood, don't know. Like you and I obviously don't recommend.
We cringe when we hear that.
No one on this listen to this does that. But I think that comes down to the property and knowing the property and knowing yourself. And if you do, you can ask those questions because you're right. Your property management fee significantly reduces when you self-manage, but what you have to take into account is your own time as well. Make sure that you say, okay, how much is my time worth? Am I willing to do this and make this operationally efficient where it is a gain? Because sometimes when people self-manage and you see how long they're taking and how manual it is, it's like, wait, okay, you definitely should have hired a property manager to get processes down. And that 10% of monthly rent is much less than what your time is doing it today.
Yeah, I totally agree. What I would strongly suggest people that are in the one rental at a time course, the free or the paid one, is really play with the 30-day trial. Because I think Hemlane gives you a fighting chance to self-manage. When I started this in 2002, Hemlane wasn't there. It was really pay somebody or try to do it myself. I was in 5 different countries a week or whatever it was. It was just not an option. It just wasn't even an option to consider. So I really love what you've done in Hemlane, giving somebody a fighting chance. And I agree. My market's 2.5 hours away. You can get a lot of places in 2.5 hours on an airplane. So I think out of state with Hemlane can work. But yeah, please don't buy sight unseen and just hope it works. Please don't do that. That's not good. That's not good.
And the other thing about it is a lot of people think that I have to select a solution now and stay with it.
Oh yeah, that's true.
We've also seen it successful where you might say, hey, I don't have the time now to self-manage. And I haven't built up a network or list. I don't know what the benchmark number should be for vacancy rates and or the rental rates. And you could use a full service property manager who has that expertise. And then after a year or two, we've seen folks move over to Hemlane and be like, okay, I know that this is the rental rate I should be receiving. Average days on market is around 15. okay, I'm good to go. I have a really good understanding of what's needed, or like what my benchmarks are, as well as I have more time now. I've educated myself over the years.
Mhm.
And so it's not like, hey, you choose a solution now and you have to stick with it.
That's
You
true.
can obviously change between solutions. And we have people who come to Hemlane where we tell them it's not a good fit for them.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that, but it's probably the best thing to do for sales, and like that, making sure that it's a right fit.
Mhm.
There are some people who come and like never respond to emails to like set up showings with agents and things. It's like, okay, if you're not on top of it right now, you're not going to be on top of it with the tenants, and that's not fair to your tenants.
Yeah.
You should just use
Yeah. We're going to document how bad you are. That's not good.
And so it's interesting because there is that as well on our side that we've been doing, and it makes it a better experience for everyone, because don't forget, the tenants are your customers. And so we're looking out for you. If we say you probably shouldn't be self-managing,
Yeah.
and it's because we're looking out for your customer, who's the tenant.
That's awesome. So folks, again, if you're in the course, or you follow the channel, and you want to pretend to be a landlord for a little bit, you have to try the 30-day trial. Dana, where can they find that?
You can go to www.hemlane.com, and then just mention the One Rental at a Time show or Michael Zuber's name, because either way, you'll get 20% off your first year.
That's very cool, folks. And again, in the show descriptions, there should be a link down there as well. But yeah, hemlane.com. Take the 30-day trial. It's the holidays. A lot of you will be off work. I strongly suggest, if you own 0 rentals, get the POC, get the pilot or trial. God, I'm getting my software words messed up. Get the trial, play with it, use the PDF, or even watch the video series in the course. Thanks, Dana.
Great. Thanks, Michael.